Welcome to another episode of Fave 5 from Fans, where we explore all things favorite. I'm your host, Jamie Ray, and today we have a first-time guest, not just to our show, but to podcasts in general. So be nice to him. Steve B is joining me from across the pond, not in the UK as we've done before, but in France, where he had French fries for lunch, I bet. Sorry, that was horrible. But we are going to talk about the our Fave 5 Avengers comic book issues. Steve B is an old fan of, well, he's not old. I mean, I'm old. Well, we're about to say, anyway, uh, of the Avengers, especially the Silver Age group up until the early 80s. So let's say bonjour and welcome to the show, Steve.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, sir. Sorry, that was probably really corny, but what are you gonna do? I do like
That's
y'all's
fine.
cheese over there, though.
We do, we do. We love our cheese and we love our wine. So yeah,
It's awesome. So, I can tell from your accent that you're originally from the Bronx in New Jersey, correct? That area. But
I I grew up in Surrey in the UK.
okay.
Then we moved around a bit to kind of the southwest, and then up to the north in Yorkshire. And then my wife and I moved to France. We both took kind of early retirement, and now I live. I'm very fortunate to live a life of leisure in France, spending my time reading comics and reading about comics, and yeah, just having fun in general.
It blows me away. Before the show, we were talking, and you're maybe 2 years older than I am, and you're already retired, eating cheese and reading comics, and I'm like, what have I done with my life? And you're not that far from home compared, to some places. I mean, you can hop a rail or do a something, and
Yeah.
you can be home pretty quick, huh? Or
Yeah, we went back to the UK this year just to visit my father and stuff like that. But yeah, we love it in France. We're kind of in the north of France. We're in Normandy,
oh,
and we're
I'm
we're
familiar with
just
that.
oh yeah,
Yeah, World
how
War II,
come?
you know.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're in Normandy. We're kind of experiencing the tail end of Storm Dara at the moment, which has been
Oh,
battering the UK for the last couple of days.
okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But
So if it
other than
blinks
that, we're
out,
all good.
yeah, if it blinks out, we'll know you're in the bathtub with your head over the. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
That's what they taught us. Well, listen, I am so excited that you were able to join me and to do this list. I was given your name through a mutual friend, a podcast show host. I mean, guest, and again, this is your first ever podcast, so I'm super excited to have you on the show. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I hope so.
Yeah. So it better be. Or I'm canceling your check. Um, So again, you're a big fan of the Avengers, and so what we decided to do is to look at all of the standard Avengers runs. So there have been one, two, at least three volumes of the actual Avengers,
Yeah,
and so there's what is it, 400 something total in just that group? Um,
probably. Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, didn't it get to like 300 in volume one?
yeah, yeah, at least.
So yeah, yeah,
So we
there's a
went
lot of
back.
them.
Yeah.
But I think we're both kind of old school fans. So certainly mine are probably early Avengers.
Yes, mine too. There are some going to be surprises, especially in my honorable mentions. Um, Speaking of which, I offered you the opportunity to not only make your list of your five favorites, but also to come up with honorable mentions, things that maybe didn't quite make the list, had to be shoved off because something you loved more, or something that was so interesting that they had to be mentioned. Do you have a couple of those?
I do indeed.
Well,
I've got a big stack of comics over here.
oh,
So let me
wait, a
grab
big
my first
stack.
one.
It should just be seven. I mean, come on.
Right.
Why don't we do that? Let's go ahead and we'll jump straight into what your honorable mentions are.
Okay. I can't find it.
That's
Oh, there we are. There we are. There we are.
okay. You got it?
Okay.
Let's do it.
So first honorable mention, Avengers 198.
The what? Red Ronin?
Yes, I love this story. It's crazy. I mean, it starts brilliantly with, let me hold it up there, with
Uh-huh.
a very drunk Beast and Wonder Man wandering the streets of New York very early in the morning, and then they just happen to stumble across a giant red robot.
As it will happen in New York early mornings.
Absolutely. I mean, I love this. Ronin, I didn't know who Red Ronin was when I first read this. I mean, I've been, reading these since I was a kid. And I kind of, for me, it was kind of exploring an alternative history. I didn't really like real world history, kings and queens and all that.
Well,
Boring. Superheroes, awesome.
yes.
So, I love this kind of stuff. And I didn't know who Red Ronin was, but it turns out he was, I grab my next he was designed to fight Godzilla
That's right.
because Marvel had the rights to Godzilla for a little while,
Hmm.
and he was he was always getting stolen. Even in Godzilla, he got stolen two times by, I think it's like a 12-year-old kid or something.
Like, come on, dudes,
So
change the locks, something.
yeah, though, and back in the 80s, you could steal giant robots quite easily.
Oh,
It
yeah.
turns out, but it turns out he gets stolen again. Only this time he's stolen by some guy who wants to bring about world peace by starting World War III. I mean,
Yes.
this is
Sound
this is
logic
comic,
there. Hmm.
yeah, comic book logic for you. But it's just such. I mean, it's kind of a two-part story, but I love the fact that it kind of uses New York geography because I'm kind of obsessed with New York. I've been a couple of
Okay.
times, and he's kind of stomping around New York and up to Long Island and stuff like that. And
Not to
then the
Jersey, though.
Avengers,
Yeah.
no, not to Jersey. And then the Avengers have to tackle this giant red robot, which they can't do very well because they don't know what's going on,
And they're hungover.
and they're hungover. And I love the fact that quite early on, the Beast and Wonder Man get grabbed by Shield out of the streets of New York, and then it's just all action for the next two issues. And it's just, I mean, it's a very simple story, but it's kind of classic Avengers. It's kind of light in tone, and it's just really great fun, and it has some awesome moments. I can't really find it now, but there's an awesome moment where Iron Man is kind of hooked up to this enormous shield helicarrier kind of
Okay.
thing, and they just kind of zap Red Ronin. In fact, that's how this issue ends. They zap Red Ronin, and he's kind of cut in two, and then he
Oh,
just carries on. He kind of carries on, clawing his way through the water, and it's
must
it's
have
just
world peace.
yeah,
Ugh.
it's just a really fun two-part story, and I love it. But it's not quite good enough to get into my top five list, so that's why it's an honorable mention.
That is a perfect example of an honorable mention. Good on you, sir. Just wondering, do Beast or Wonder Man throw up on Nick Fury's feet at one point? Because that would be awesome.
They don't, sadly, but no, they come pretty close.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a
And you have
terrific
another
issue.
one for us.
I do. My other honorable mention. Now, I don't know if I can get away with this. This is a bit of a cheat.
Oh, okay. It's all right. As an honorable mention, if you can defend
Yeah.
it, I'll discuss it with the judges and we'll see.
Okay. I hope Rom allows this. So this is a bit of a cheat. It's a
Oh,
Daredevil
such a
issue.
cheat. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should wait for your dissertation. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is, I mean, this is such a great issue. I mean, this is part of Frank Miller's Born Again storyline in Daredevil. So it's an instant classic anyway.
Instant.
But this is right at the end of this story. And Daredevil has been fighting against Nuke in the streets of Hell's Kitchen, and buildings are ablaze. Carnage has been set loose, and not Carnage from Spider-Man, but
I
just
was I
Carnage in
was
general.
thinking it, but didn't say it.
But then the Avengers turn up, and it's just the way the Avengers are viewed by Daredevil and by those in the streets of Hell's Kitchen. There's a wonderful moment where I think it's Ben Urich is looking up to Captain America, who's kind of ordering the Avengers around to save people. And where, let me see if I can find it.
as Captain America's want to do.
Yes. And it says, out of nowhere they appear, a soldier with a voice that could command a god and does.
It
And
does.
there's this and there's this wonderful panel of Thor just making it rain to put out the fires.
Yeah,
And it's just so brilliant. It's pure Frank Miller, pure
yeah,
class. And it's just I love the idea that you're kind of, because if you're just reading Avengers, you're hanging out with the Avengers all the time,
right.
and really after a while nothing seems remarkable. But here you're seeing them from kind of a street level view.
Yeah.
So you're kind of looking up at these awesome figures doing amazing stuff, but it's just I really love that
That's
aspect of it. So that's my honorable mention.
okay. Let's see. What do you think? Yeah. He's really okay. Because it's your first ever podcast, the judges have allowed it. So yes, we
I'm
like it.
glad
And
to
what
hear it.
number was that?
That was Daredevil 233.
233. All right. I dig that, man. Good choices. Good choices. You're off to a good start.
Good, good. Okay, so you got an honorable mention?
I have two because
Two.
it's my show and I play the rules. First off, I do have to mention I am wearing the correct apparel for the show.
So
I have a
what does it say
oh,
on it?
it says Avengers and it's got assemble, dissemble, heroes, um, teammates, oh, I think it even has
Assemble.
disassembled on it. So it's a gift. We do a Friendsmas every year where it's the family that we choose. And so we all get together and we all give each other nerd gifts. Um, there's like a group of seven of us, I believe, plus ones. And a few of them are in the comic industry, a few of them are artists, and then there's me. So it's the rest. But we always give ourselves shirts like this to each other. So
Very cool.
yeah. So my first one is going to be Avengers Volume One, Issue 221. This one especially is on my list because of the cover. And that cover is the one where the Avengers are adding new members, and they are trying to add two new members. It's an iconic cover that will actually be here in the middle when you're watching this, and it's a red cover with images of like Luke Cage, the Hulk, a Spider Woman, and more importantly, Rom the Space Knight.
I know
Anyone
it
who
well.
yeah, anyone who knows me knows that I am a huge Rom fan. And this one is especially fun because even though we knew it wasn't going to happen, it was just cool to see Rom was included. So you've got Jim Shooter and Dave Michelin who are doing the writing, and Bob Hall doing the cover, with Brett Breeding coming in and doing the inking on it. And I just love the fact that the cover has all of these different potential people who could be in the Avengers, and he is included in it.
Yeah.
As you could tell, I'm a huge Rom the Space Knight fan. This is actually a an oil painting that my wife's best friend from high school, her daughter was a burgeoning artist, and I asked her to do me a little oil painting, and this is what she turned in. And I'm
That's
like, oh,
incredible.
girl, I don't know that I can afford that. But we came to a good agreement, and I love Rom. He's just the as good as Captain America is, as much of a Boy Scout as he is. Captain America, as we know, has gone rogue and gone off the wagon a couple times. No matter
Yeah.
how they write it, that's what happened. Rom has never been the bad guy. So I'm gonna stick with that one, issue 221.
Very
My
good.
second, oh, thank you. My second honorable mention is a cheat because it's from the Mighty Avengers,
Okay.
Volume One, Issue Two. So we've got Brian Michael Bendis and the amazing Frank Cho. They are now coming in with after the appearance of the Mole Man, and all the stuff from the Invasion series that was in Marvel. They've come to rescue a woman, and without giving too much away, it ends up being a Ultron replica of Janet Van Dyne, whose kind of silver naked body is making everybody kind of fight her like this. And and then yeah, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and give away. In the end, you find out that it's actually been a hijacked Tony Stark all along. And I'm just reading this going, what in the what? But it's really again, Frank Cho knows how to draw anatomy, period, but
Yeah.
especially the female anatomy. And when you get Brian Michael taking this, beautiful creature and finding out it's the deadliest robot, in the universe, probably, just really kind of throws everybody on the end. And then when Janet is basically looking at a robot version of herself, knowing that her husband is or her ex, I can't keep up with him, is the one who originally created him so long ago. Uh, it's just, just different kinds of ick. Um, so again, I love this issue. The cover is amazing. You've got this Van Dyne replica thing rising out of the shell of a Ultron head, and it's a good read. The Mighty Avengers didn't last for an extremely long time. I think it maybe had 3 or 4 years run to it, um, but there's some amazing comics. And because they're not in the original list, I decided to put this one as an honorable mention. Now,
Jolly good.
have you read? I mean, I'm assuming, do you go off and read all of the offshoot Avengers and stuff like that?
I've read a few over the years. I mean, I carried on buying, new comics until I don't know, probably the early 2000s, I guess, maybe a little bit later. So I've read some of the Bendis ones and the Frank
Yeah.
Cho ones and stuff like that. I didn't read so many of the spin-offs. Certainly, when I was growing up, most of the comics that I read were UK reprints,
Yes.
and that's why I'm a Marvel fan because you couldn't really get there was no kind of DC equivalent, but where Marvel had a UK office,
Yeah.
and they'd turn out the black and white reprints, and there was the odd little bit of kind of original material that they did,
Mhm.
Captain Britain and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was this kind of thing. This is where I read a lot of
Yes.
those early Avengers issues. It's in
Uh-huh.
Marvel superheroes. It's all black and white, but in a
You get
way,
like
that's
three or
kind of
four
better.
different comics each month,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, it's not just
yeah,
it's
that's
not
right.
just one person.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So you get a whole bunch of stuff. You get kind of text articles and what have you. And in a way, the black and white art, and it's a bigger size than the US comics, but it kind of
Yeah.
allows you to see the art in kind of a nicer form in some ways because the coloring certainly until the 90s was pretty dreadful in most comics. But yeah, so I that's where I got most of my kind of comic reading in the early days, and then I think when I was probably about 12 years old, 11 or 12, we gradually start getting you know the original US Marvels,
Right.
and so I started buying those and never stopped really.
Never stop. Yeah. Now, do your comics have the pound marks on them, or is it one of those that has both the US and the pound marks to them?
Most of them have, let's see, that one I think I probably bought off eBay, so that's
Oh,
just got
okay.
the cents. It's a cents copy. I'm such a sad collector because they're kind of little bits of Americana. You kind of want cents versions rather than
Right.
pence versions.
Yeah.
Um, some people like the pence versions because they're apparently rarer, but I like the
Yeah.
original American
Well,
version.
there you
So
go. So I'm again huge ROM collector, and I have a friend in the UK who we've traded stuff before,
oh
and so
yeah,
he'll send me some of the ROM comics that have the you call them pence.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, they have the pence on them. And again, it's the exact same comic, but that one little thing is a different. And then
yeah.
he's also sent me some appearances of ROM in, I believe it was a French comic book, Lestrange. And
Okay.
I think it was the same type of thing. It was black and white reproductions
Yeah.
from like 3 or 4 different comics for each month. But they had some amazing um, painted covers on them, and Rom was on 3 of them. So I have
Cool.
those as well. Yeah, but anyway, well, great. Well, all right. Well, we have now knocked out all of our honorable mentions. We are ready to get into the meat and potatoes, or the I don't know what you guys eat over there. Um,
Meat and potatoes.
there you go. So let's hear what your number five is.
Okay, my number five is number four.
Oh,
So,
good one.
excuse me. So, I love this issue. I probably paid way too much money for this issue because I still occasionally buy things on eBay. Um, and obviously, it's the first Silver Age appearance of Captain America. He'd been around since 1940, but this was the first time he appeared in a proper Marvel comic.
Right.
Um, so, or in fact, it really wasn't, which I'll come to in a minute. But anyway, um, this story, what I love about this is the way that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were kind of building an ongoing narrative. So this story starts kind of where issue three leaves off. Issue three had the Avengers fighting against Namor, the Submariner. And at the beginning of this issue, he's kind of stormed off and he's kind of swimming through the sea. And he's in a bit of a mood because he got beaten by the Avengers in the previous issue. And he comes across a bunch of Eskimos who are worshipping this weird figure on the
Ice
ice.
God. Yes.
And he chases them off and says, "What are you worshipping this lump of ice for?" And he flings it into the sea, and then it drifts into warmer waters. It thaws out, and of course, it happens to contain Captain America.
Captain America, baby.
And he's rescued by the Avengers, who for some reason are just passing by in a submarine. That's never
Well,
really explained, but
yeah, they were going out for hot dogs, you know?
exactly. So you get this wonderful kind of rescue of Captain America. They realize who he is. He hasn't been seen since the end of World War II, even though he was actually around in the 50s, but let's look over that. And
How
then
did
you
that
kind of
work
get,
again?
yeah, well, it turns out he was he was a different one or something. I
Yeah,
think Steve
it was a
Englehart brings it up
clone, if I'm not
later.
mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, Cap's revived, and then he tells his kind of tragic backstory where Bucky was killed
Yeah.
uh, by Baron Zemo when they were trying to defuse a flying bomb. Um, Bucky was killed, and Cap was thrown into the water and got frozen, and that's how he ended up in a block of ice. And
Right.
Namor found him. But it's just it's just a classic story. I don't know whether it's Jack Kirby who wanted to introduce him into the Avengers
Hmm.
or whether it was Stan's idea. But what I like about this, they actually did before Avengers 4 came out, they did a tryout for Captain America a few months before in Strange Tales, where he
Yes.
fought against the Human Torch, except it wasn't really Cap. It was just one of his old foes, the Acrobat. And we know this is a tryout because Stan's last words in this issue are, "You guessed it. This story was really a test to see if you too would like Captain America to return. As usual, your letters will give us the answer." And then
Wow.
obviously they must have got a few letters because
Yeah.
so he
A
turned up with
few.
the Avengers. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it kind of completes the classic lineup of the
Yep.
Avengers. Um, you know, you got uh, the Wasp and Giant Man, you got Thor, you got Iron Man, and now finally you've got Cap. And I
No Hulk.
mean,
Hulk's
no Hulk,
pouted and left off too.
yeah, but I mean, you don't get a much better lineup than those guys. So
No, you don't.
it's a great issue, and I love it.
That's a great pick. I must say you're doing quite well for your first time.
Cool.
Um, well, okay. Well, my number five is a little bit of a cheat because I couldn't choose just one. I had to choose both Avengers Volume 1 issues 244 and 245 by Roger Stern, Al Milgrom, and Carmine Infantino with inks by the legendary Joe Sinnott. This is a ROM tie-in. Oh my gosh, who would have figured?
I'm sensing a theme here.
So this is a really fun issue where the Dire Wraiths, who are of course Rom's, immortal anyway, enemies, have snuck onto Cape Canaveral Space Center and I'm sorry, was it Canaveral or Kennedy? Yeah, it was Kennedy, Kennedy Space Center,
This
trying
is
to.
important
Yeah, it is
research.
important. As a NASA kid, I should know that. Um, and of course, back then you had all of these different stories going on at the same time. So you've got Clint and Bobby are out in Los Angeles to meet up with Bill Foster, which is cool because he's a great giant man. Love that. And then
Yep.
in Transia, Quicksilver and Lockjaw are trying to find. I think they're trying to catch up with who their real father was. But at the Cape, you've got the Avengers meeting up with General Bridges, who maybe in the new Captain America movie. Don't know. And Dr. Woodrow Cathard to discuss the threat of the dire wraiths. And the Vision shows up to make sure that they're good. But in all of that, you've got the Rocketeers showing up using jamming devices to get into the Avengers mansion, which, whew, I bet you, God, I totally messed that up. Jarvis was mad. He probably came after him, with his broom. But the dire wraiths are trying to get the ion drive from that new spaceship, and they are able to, at the very end of the issue, Scarlet Witch is able to show their true forms, and now they know they're in trouble. So then you jump to the next issue, and we get Captain Marvel showing up, but not the Carol Danvers and not the Marvel, but we're getting the really cool photon light beam Captain America. I mean Captain
Yeah.
Marvel. And so then there's a fight with them. And somehow one of the dire wraiths ends up with Rom's neutralizer. And but in the end, it's all okay because they're able to defeat the wraiths. There's even some on the shield carrier, I believe. Um, and then of course we wrap it all up with in Los Angeles, um, Hawkeye and Mockingbird are there to start off what becomes the West Coast Avengers. So a lot of stuff going in this, but I will not lie. This is mostly for the covers and the dire wraiths in there. Anytime you show a dire wraith, they show up in, um, gosh, they show up in, the X-Men at one point. There's a lot of different. So this was during that really cool period that I enjoyed them. So that's my number five, a cheat. And you know what? I don't even have to confer with the judges because it's my show. So number 244 and 245.
Very
So
good.
thank you. So let's jump back to you and hear what your number four is going to be.
Okay, well, my number four
Let's just
is
go back to the
another.
stack.
Yeah, let's go back to the stack. It's another number four. It's
Oh,
giant size four.
oh, that is such a. Is that the? Hold up a little bit more. Is that the wedding?
It
Yes,
is.
that's a great one with Dora Mumu, I think.
Yeah, yeah, Dormammu.
Dormammu.
Is
Yeah,
that how you say it? However you
that's how
pronounce
I
it.
say it. But here in Louisiana, if your old granny wears a house coat, it's called a muumuu. And
Yes.
so I don't know what I do. Every time I see him, I think of Dora Mumu. And that's end up what I say.
Well, I had to be careful talking about Namor earlier because I say submariner rather than
Yeah.
submariner. So,
Ah, I did it too for a long time.
and I only recently found out Kazar is pronounced Kazar. I always pronounced it Kazar.
Oh, see,
Kazar.
now I had you on that one. I was always pronouncing it as Kazar.
I
So
see it. See, for me, it should have a Y in if it's Kazar, but hey. Anyway, so
Kazar. So yeah, back to
so
number four.
giant size Avengers number four. I mean, this I love Steve Englehart's run on the Avengers. He wrote some really great stuff, and this is kind of the conclusion of one of his big stories, which is the Celestial Madonna saga, which had
Yeah.
been going on for an awful long time, and it finally comes to a conclusion in this issue. And I mean, so much has been happening. I won't even try to attempt to describe the plot of this issue, but as well as the wedding of the Vision and Scarlet Witch, we also get the wedding of Mantis, who it turns out is the Celestial Madonna.
Right.
Yep. Who we all know so well from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies now.
Yes.
But before that, she wasn't even green at this point. She's still just a Vietnamese woman who's very good at karate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it turns out she's the celestial Madonna. She'd been trained to be the perfect human being by the priests of Parma. And so she has to marry a tree for some reason.
Pretty much, this
So,
sounds like Taylor Swift's life. Uh, I'm sorry.
so,
Anyway, you go back. Go ahead.
so yeah, she's the priests of Parma who trained her were kind of sheltered by this alien race of kind of sentient plants, sentient trees called I think it's pronounced Cotati. I'm
Okay.
not, Cotati, Cotati,
Just say them all.
however
We'll
you
get
want
it
to pronounce
covered
it.
right and fix it in post edit.
Um, and it turns out she has to, in order to fulfill her destiny as the celestial Madonna, she has to get married to the leader of the Cotati, who is a tree, and she expresses her surprise herself. Um, Woman, have you not seen that you are to marry that tree? And she's like, What? What did you say? And then they explain it all to her. And at the end of this issue, she finally turns green and kind of flies off into the universe and wasn't really seen in another Marvel comic for the next 10 years. Um, Apparently, no one at Marvel really liked Mantis.
Yeah.
They disliked the fact that she spoke about herself in the third person. She would never say, I see him. She would say, this one sees him. And apparently that used to drive everyone nuts. Um, so only Steve Englehart really wrote the character. And in fact, he carried the character on when he moved to DC. There's a character called Willow who turns up with the Justice League, and she's
Okay.
green, and she refers to herself as this one. So
Ah.
you do the math.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
But it's such a completely, I mean, it's a really long-term story, the Celestial Madonna saga, and it was quite an ambitious thing for comics in those days. Nowadays, it's kind of it happens all the time. But I love the ambition of the story, and I just love the craziness of it. You got to marry a tree, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. So yeah, that's my number four.
Well, as this is a family show, I've been trying very hard to avoid making comments about waking up with wood. And so I will just move on from the tree and talk about my number four.
Good idea.
Wait, but I still said it, so I don't know. Um, it's going to be Avengers Volume 1, Issue 233. This is going to be part of the Roger Stern and John Byrne issues. Hey, that rhymes. And Byrne also doing pencils with, again, inks by Joe Sinnott. This is a, and I'll have to tell you, a lot of mine are made because of the covers. As a kid, those were the ones that drew you in, and then you're like, "Oh yeah, cool. There's a great story behind this one." So
Yeah.
this is the one that probably a good third of the cover is just a blank void. And all of the Avengers that have powers, they're pouring everything on, trying to get into it. So when you get into the story, you realize that there's an invisible barrier around the Baxter building that's been brought on by Annihilus, which is the guy with the dog collar type thing. He's escaped from the negative zone and he's trapped the Fantastic Four inside. He's lost the little cosmic control rod, which is what keeps him immortal. So he's out there trying to find it. So the Avengers show up to help, but nobody can break through. And even the Vision and the Scarlet Witch show up, but when Vision tries to go through the barrier himself, he basically gets shut down. So Star Fox actually shows up. And no, I'm not talking about Harry Styles. Figures out what Anil is up to and comes with a plan. So again, Captain Marvel comes in, the pre-photon, and is able to merge with a beam from the Starcore satellite, turning into a powerful gamma ray laser. She didn't become green, and is able to get through the barrier and kick him back to the negative zone. So one of the reasons I love this issue is because of the cover. And it's been a great cover for me to get people to sign on it. Um,
Okay.
One of the things that I will say right away that one of the best things about living in the US is the amount of comic conventions and the people who will show up. Back in the day, John Byrne was very accessible. You could bring him, 10, 12 comics and he'd sign them all. Roger Stern has always been very accessible, not just for this, but for also the Superman things that he did.
Mm.
So I was able to go and meet them and talk to them about it. But I love the fact that so much of this cover is blank, which when you think about it is counterintuitive to what most of the other covers on comic books are about. They're
Yeah.
about filling that one with action and mystery and intrigue, and they want to suck you in. But on this one, they're leaving a huge blank space. And one of the best uses of this, um, in that time period for sure. But later on, it would go into like whiteout cover,
Mm.
and then DC would do the whole 0 hour where their half of their covers were coming off and stuff. But this is the one that
Yeah.
always to me stands out, and it's a great crossover where you have the Avengers fighting to help the Fantastic Four as well. And so those great. I can't wait for the Marvel universe to have X-Men, Fantastic Four, and the Avengers.
Yeah.
My head is probably going to explode in the theater. It'll be like a Gallagher splatter zone for the people who go with me. But anyway, that's my number four. I love it, and I can't wait to hear what your third favorite Avengers cover is.
So my number three, back to the stack, Avengers 60.
Yes,
Okay. So this is really the first time Hank Pym goes a little bit crazy.
and
Um,
not the last.
no, not the last, definitely not the last. Um, so this is kind of the second part of a two-parter, and it's the first appearance of Yellow Jacket in issue 59. Um, and at that point, when he turns up at the beginning of the previous issue, you don't know that it's Hank Pym. It's just some new superhero has turned up in New York, and for some reason, he goes to Avengers Mansion. He does stop a few crimes from happening first, but then he goes to Avengers Mansion and he tells Janet Van Dyne, as she was back then, because she wasn't married to him then, um, that he's killed Hank Pym and now I'm going to kidnap you. And so he takes Janet Van Dyne away,
What a
smuggles her
first date!
away. Yeah, what a first date. What a guy. Um, so he kidnaps her. The Avengers don't really put up much of a fight, takes off with Janet Van Dyne. And then at the end of that issue, um, the Avengers hunt him down, and Jan says, "No, you leave him alone. I'm going to marry him." Dun dun dun. Next issue. So then we get to the conclusion of this story, and this is from what year was this cut? Did this come out? So this came out in 1968. Oh, year I was born.
Oh,
Um, and it features the wedding of another wedding issue, the wedding of Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym.
starting to see a
Apparently,
pattern here.
yeah. Apparently, Roy Thomas wrote this while he was on his honeymoon to his first wife.
Oh, cool.
Um, and it kind of makes you wonder what sort of views he had about women because Jan just kind of she's either fainting or she's essentially kind of conning Hank Pym into marrying her whilst he's having a bit of a kind of bit of a breakdown.
Yeah, as
Um,
women will do.
absolutely, it's like an old Lois Lane comic or something, an old where Lois Lane tries to con Superman into marrying her. Except this time she does. I mean, they
Yeah.
actually get married and they stay married, and it eventually, turns out that Hank had now what does she call it? She calls it accident-induced schizophrenia, which I'm
Okay.
sure is a real.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
that's
it's
a
a real thing.
real condition. It turns out he'd I must have been thinking of Jan, of our love, of the things which kept me from proposing to her, when I carelessly dropped some vials containing various untested gases, like you do.
Yeah, it's happened to
Somehow
me
they
countless times.
somehow they affected me, turned me into a man in many ways the opposite of Hank Pym. And so he gets up the courage to marry Jan, and they live happily ever after, or maybe not. But
Maybe
it's
not
just
so much.
no, maybe not. But Roy Thomas, I love Roy Thomas's writing, but I often find that he's writing his stories have kind of what I call a dream logic to them. It's
Uh,
like when you have a dream and crazy things are happening to you, but you don't think anything of it. You're in the middle of a dream, it just seems normal. But then you wake up the next morning and you kind of think about that dream and you think, what on earth was that all about? Roy Thomas's stories are kind of the same as that. While you're reading them, they sort of make sense, but then when you get to the end, you're like, that makes no sense whatsoever.
which
But
was
that's
why he was really great on What If.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. These old Silver Age comics, a lot of them are like that. They have that kind of weird logic to them. And I'm sure it made perfect sense to Roy,
Yeah.
but nowadays, viewed through a modern lens, it just seems crazy. And that's why I love it all the more.
And talking about that, yeah, he went hard bad. But gosh, so much better than what happens in the Ultimates
Oh,
because
yes.
he is horrible in that series to her. Oh my God, with the ants and everything else.
Yes.
Oh,
It's kind of a shame. It sort of became the one defining thing about Hank Pym is that
I
he's
know.
he's kind of an awful person now.
I mean, even the fact that he created Ultron,
Yeah.
even though he meant it to be a good thing, he's the one that. So, which was kind of interesting how it ends up being Tony Stark who does it in the MCU, which just it seems like Tony did so many things that turned crap, but yet he's still looked at as the good guy.
Yeah.
I guess just because he dies in the end. I don't know. We won't go down that road. What we
I
will
think yeah,
do. Let's go
I
ahead.
think, I mean, I think that's kind of why they didn't use Hank because he's kind of seen as, a very sort of toxic character. So, well, we'll just kind of skip over Hank Pym and we'll go straight to
The
the
Scott. No.
Scott
Yeah, I'm with
Scott
you.
Lang
I'm with
Ant-Man. Um,
you.
yeah, so it kind of makes sense, but it is kind of a shame because the whole sort of Ultron thing is so connected to Hank Pym, and it
Yeah,
just didn't work quite so well in the MCU, I don't think.
yeah. I do feel that it was a really good move for him to uh, be so attached to Janet,
Mm.
um, and that when they finally get her out of the quantum verse, um, you don't have any shades of that stuff from the comics. It's just
No, quite.
they do have a good love, and then even when you see them in the cartoons, um they're it's a different appeal. So I think it was a very good move, like you just said, to leave that toxic trait out of him.
Yes.
And Scott Lang's a great Ant-Man. I mean, he is definitely the redefined hero who's you know bad guy who's lost his way, who finds a better way and redeems himself. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, to the point where Rom connection here. He one of his early comics, he's like working on this electronics and he's welding and all of this stuff, and he finally gets finished and he goes up through the vents and everything and he pops out, and he's been working on right in here of this Rom toy. And it's like, and then Cassie gets home and he's like, "Hey, Cassie, I fixed your toy." It's just, it is a really great use of that character to show that people make mistakes but can still have a path to redemption. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I'm with you. Great choice, man. Great choice.
Cool. Cool.
All right.
So,
Well,
have you done your number three?
I have not done my number three, so sit down.
Okay.
This is actually this is from actually volume three of
Okay.
the Avengers. Okay. I don't even have to ask the judges because it is still an Avengers comic. There's no mighty in front of it, there's no secret in the title. This is issue two of the Heroes Return comic. Now, this is when you had Kurt Busiek, I don't know how you're going to say it, and
I
George
think he
Perez.
pronounces it Busick.
Busiek. Okay. All right.
Busick.
Well, he's a huge fan of the show, so I'm sure he'll write in and correct me. Um, But in the first issue, Thor has arrived in Asgard to see that it's been laid to ruins, the Rainbow Bridge is shattered with no sign of life, and the Twilight Sword has been stolen. And in this issue, you come and find out that the expanded Avengers are brought together to retrieve it and the Mystic Norn stones. So there are 5 teams of Avengers going to every corner of the Earth, but then they find themselves running up against Morgan Le Fay, who happens to have all of them, and they're all kind of turned into a medieval reality, and they're
I
all
remember this.
yes, and it's such a beautiful cover. They're all there with their arms raised up, and like Captain America is a knight. Iron Man is, yes, it's armor, but it's like medieval armor. You've got so many people on this cover. George Perez, aside from being an amazing person, I had the opportunity to meet him twice. We both have the same haircut, um, and he was just such a jolly, jolly man to meet. To know that the incredible talent that he had in that hand, that he could make these just, I mean, I can't even count. There's probably 40 plus Avengers on this cover, and
Mhm.
every one of them is done with a unique twist and to it, and um, the story inside that goes along with it, and every panel of every page is just a masterpiece. This was another short run series that came out. Let's see, it came out back in, this one was in January of 1998. And I believe, let's see, I could find out real quick. It lasted for, ooh, that's a little bit longer than I thought. 55, 65. Lasted till 84 issues with Namor in his Speedo being the final cover. uh, but it ends with Scarlet Witch using her powers, and she is able to summon back, I believe, the dead, discorporated Wonder Man.
Oh,
And
yes.
then now he's in that ion energy phase for much of the rest of the run, which was such a cool look. I mean, just the way he was all like that ionic energy. There's a cover, I don't remember which one it is. Of course, 3 is when he appears back, but there's another one where it's all dark. 11, and it's just such a great look. This
Yeah.
was a fun run. It lasted a little longer than I thought it did, but those two guys really knew how to tell a story. And so that's why I chose it as my number 3.
Yeah, I'm a huge George Perez fan, as you'll be able to tell from my next
Oh,
issue.
but
But
before you get to your next issue,
yes.
your penultimate choice.
Nobody says
Why don't we stop for
penultimate.
just a minute? I would love to hear more about how you got into the Avengers. Is it your go-to comic when you were a kid, or did you develop it later? Tell me all about your love for the Avengers.
It wasn't really. I mean, I've always been a Fantastic Four fan, to be honest. Um, but when I started kind of buying these comics on a regular basis, the UK reprints, the Avengers was kind of the headline act, so to speak.
Right.
Um, and it was kind of the peak of the Jim Shooter run, um, with George Perez penciling, or John Byrne. So just wonderful
Couldn't go
art.
wrong.
No, exactly. And Jim Shooter's stories were just really captivating. I'd read a lot of kind of Silver Age stuff, all the Stan Lee and the Jack Kirby stuff, and Jim Shooter's writing was kind of sort of the next level of sophistication, to be honest. It really didn't. I always, when I was reading those older comics, you kind of had to read them with the knowledge of the context that they were written in. You
Exactly.
knew times had changed, but you kind of enjoyed them for what they were.
Yeah.
But with this stuff, I was reading it, almost as it was coming out. I think there was a bit of a delay on the UK stuff.
Okay.
Um, but I was kind of reading it shortly after they came out, and it just felt very contemporary. It didn't talk down to me. I felt like an adult reading this stuff. Even though it's about men in spandex hitting one another. That's quite sophisticated stories.
Sure.
So I just fell in love with the Avengers, and I loved the lineup as well. I mean, it was the time when you had Beast and Wonder Man, as well as the classics, Iron Man and Vision. Vision always fascinated me as well, and his
Right.
relationship with Scarlet Witch, and all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of fell in love with the Avengers at that point. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just they mean a lot to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And from what you're saying, that's great. Even back then, even though you may have been a month or two behind of what the US was getting, there was no internet to spoil it for you.
No,
So
absolutely.
you were reading it for the first time without any preconceived notion of what was happening. That was the
Yeah,
golden age, man. I mean,
absolutely.
it really was. And you're so right, because you go back and you look at, say, Stan, and of course when you say Stan Lee, we have to recognize the fact that Stan had his name on a lot of people's work
Mm,
because that was just how it happened. Um, a lot of things since his passing have come out. Um, Marvel would not be what it was without the Ditkos and the Kirbys and Stan Lees. But there are a lot of people in the background that were helping develop that didn't really get the credit they deserved.
no,
Um,
absolutely.
that being said, the writing, where we may look at it back then as being, very basic and didn't really explore a lot of things, well, that's because that's the times. I mean, that's what
Mm,
people, they didn't want to read in the 60s about a superhero beating his wife.
no,
Um, it wasn't until later when our world changed and those types of subjects came out of the dark that were brought to light. And just like you said, with Shooter's writing and later on, Stern, all those guys, they were keeping up because, I mean, really there wasn't much to go ahead of your time, because the I don't think the audience would have accepted it, or
no.
would have wanted it. So I think the Avengers, one of the main things behind their point was that they had a team of people who would constantly change and constantly shift. And that's kind of us in our lives. We have
Yeah,
a core group of friends, and then we have people who come in and go out, and we have people with special abilities that can do things we can't do. Um, so I think it's really kind of a nice little mirror to our lives at the time,
yeah, absolutely.
But I
And I
will I
think
will hit up with you. The Fantastic Four was also an amazing run back then.
yes. Yeah, I mean, another thing I like about the Avengers is the fact that a lot of their best stories, like you were saying earlier with Hank Pym and Ultron, they're kind of caused by themselves. So yes, they do fight against kind of exterior menaces, but it all feels very much like a family, and they're kind of dealing with family problems they've created themselves,
Yeah,
and they're solving them. So yeah, I always love that aspect of the Avengers. It felt very much like a family who
yeah.
kind of they kind of stuck with one another, but they make the best of a bad job occasionally.
Right, right. And when somebody in the family messes something up, they all rally together to try to fix it. And
Absolutely.
back
Yeah.
then there wasn't a ton of blame given. I mean, of course, again, later as the stories evolved and our times evolved, then you were doing more of that. But it was kind of like, next issue, nobody really remembered
Yeah.
how he messed up or went on. Um, so I do think it's a great mirror. Comics are always a mirror for what was going on in the world at our time. Cap is always going to be a wonderful um, goal for us to try to get to, because he was the ultimate Boy Scout until
Mm,
Ron came along, and he was the guy the little shrimp who was beat up, who was just as much a hero in his mind, with all of the things that he learned and all of the books that he read and all the things that he did, because he was a little shrimp. And then when
mm,
he gets the super soldier, he doesn't become a jerk with it. He doesn't become, this all powerful whatever. He's still the same guy, and he still wants to help. And like you said, that's a perfect thing from Daredevil. He has the voice that could command gods, and he
yeah.
does. Thor, Hercules, Circe, all of these other people that come through. He was one. And so when you see him brought in on issue 4, I think it was just a stunning move on their part. And
Yeah.
it's lasted, up until now and still going on.
Yeah,
So
he's very much kind of a cornerstone of the Avengers. It never feels like the Avengers to me unless you got Cap in there and possibly Iron Man and Thor as well. Without one of those, it's not quite the Avengers somehow.
yeah,
But Cap is
exactly.
definitely, even though Cap didn't show up until issue 4, he feels like a founder member.
Right, he does.
Yeah.
And so anyway, well, I think that's wonderful, man. I agree. How many comics do you have of the
Oh
Avengers?
Lord, too
Are you one
many
of these
according to my wife.
completionists?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a full series of Rom. You'll be pleased to hear.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love Rom too. I was a huge Rom fan back in the day.
Oh, well, I
Um,
gotta hook you up then because we have a Twitter group called the Rom Pals, and that's
okay.
all we do is share Rom stuff. And it's been going on for years. And of course, now that he's back, it's a little different because you can get him everywhere. But back
Yeah.
then, we were like trading. Oh, look, here's one panel of one comic where you can see his hand. Oh my God, we all got to get that comic.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a new figure coming out, Marvel
Yes,
Legends Rom
Marvel
figure coming
Legends.
out
I'm
soon.
so excited.
Yeah, I was very pleased to see you had the original Rom action figure as well. First
Yeah.
time I've ever seen one of those. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it is. It's gonna be wonderful. Did you see the little IDW figure that came out in the big Revolutions pack?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it was $100 because you got a ROM, you got like a GI Joe, you got a Transform and all of this stuff. It was like a San Diego exclusive.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
but aside from this big guy, which you may notice, he's shiny. So what I do is before it became popular, I was buying them on eBay for like 40 and $50, and I would take them completely apart, clean everything. Sometimes I could actually even get the sounds to start working again, and then I would chrome everything and put it back
Oh,
together.
cool.
And I'm very proud to say that Chris Raal, who the guy he was at IDW at the time, who brought Rom back, he has one of these sitting in his office. So
Very
that's my
cool.
guy. He's coming on the show. I just got to work those details out with him.
Hmm.
But no, man, that's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna hook you up. I'm gonna get your mailing address after this and send you. We have a welcome package that gives you an actual membership card and everything. So
Oh, very cool. But yeah, I have way too many comics. I
whoa,
have
whoa, whoa,
I don't
whoa.
know.
We're not gonna have any of that talk on the show. You don't have way too many comics. A female may say that about us, but no, we can't.
I have a big stack of long boxes in the corner of our third bedroom, and then I have two 4 drawer filing cabinets full of them as well. So
Wow.
yeah, I think it's probably around 6 or 7 thousand altogether. Um,
Yep.
so
You're
yeah.
that's awesome. Um, well, and so now you just get to sit around eating cheese, drinking wine, and reading comics. Do you use any of the digital readers?
I do. I mean, I don't tend to like the way things are presented digitally as far as the coloring goes.
Yeah.
Part of the appeal to me is this kind of dodgy old coloring where, the
Outside the
colors will be
lines.
slightly offset and stuff like that. And that's a big part of the appeal to me. And up until recently, you could kind of find in various dodgy places kind of scans of all the old comics. And
Yes.
so I still have a whole bunch of those
Uh,
which I read digitally. But mainly, I like collecting full runs of things like the Avengers, and then I'll read like 100 issues at a time. So I've recently just read issue 100 to 200
oh,
um, for I don't know the God knows how many times. But yeah, that's what I do. At the moment, I'm currently working my way through Tomb of Dracula, which is very
oh,
cool.
yes. Have you gotten up to where
Love
Blade
Gene
gets
Colan.
introduced us?
Yes, yes,
Yes. God, he was so badass back then. Well,
yeah.
still is. I mean, but in a totally different way.
Yeah, I mean, I love Gene Colan's art, so they're an absolute joy to
Yeah,
read.
for sure. I actually have a Blade movie figure that Gene signed for me at one point.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, he was very, very cool. So, yeah. Okay, well, we could sit here and talk, I feel like all day, but I am ready for us to break off and find out, have you tell us what your penultimate Avengers comic is.
Okay, let's head back to the stack and see if I can find it. Okay, so we were talking about George Perez earlier,
Uh-huh.
and there it is in all its glory.
Beautiful.
George Perez, issue 161, which is again the second part of a two-part story.
Uh-huh.
And again, Hank Pym has
God,
kind of lost his marbles again.
what a jerk.
So this time he has kind of reverted to his Ant-Man persona, and
Okay.
he's attacked the Avengers because he doesn't know who they are. He doesn't even recognize Captain America because he's kind of reverted to a time before they discovered Captain America. He doesn't know
Oh,
who the Black
okay.
Panther is. He doesn't know who Wonder Man is, the Vision, Scarlet Witch. He doesn't know who any of them are, and he's being manipulated by Ultron. And Ultron kidnaps Jan again. She seems to get
Again.
kidnapped a lot, and he wants to create a robot. He wants to create a bride in the image of his mother, who he considers, Janet Van
Ew.
Dyne. Yeah, it all gets very kind of Oedipus complex, this kind of stuff. Again, it's Jim Shooter, wonderful art by George Perez. And there's just, I was kind of blown away by this scene as a kid. The Avengers eventually track um, Ant-Man and Jan down, and oh, hang on, see if I can find it. No, I can't find it now. But they all descend on Ultron's lair one by one. Cap kind of arrives. Thor throws his hammer through a wall.
Yeah,
Iron
he
Man
does.
blast through another wall. And even Ultron says, "Very dramatic, Avengers." It's just a wonderful moment, and it's just a great story. And for some reason, Hank Pym kind of having a bit of a breakdown always makes for a great story. And
Yeah.
it's kind of the ultimate Ultron story for me. After that, after you've done this, where he's kind of, trying to create a bride. I didn't know who Oedipus was. I didn't understand why the robot that's in the shape of Jan was called Jocasta, because I was 12 years old when I was reading these, 11, 12 years old. I didn't know any of that stuff, but it's all kind of references to classic literature and stuff like this,
Right.
classic myth, and it's just a really wonderful story. Again by Jim Shooter, who's doing kind of slightly more sophisticated stuff than you saw in a lot of comics in those days. And of course, George Perez's art is amazing.
Yes.
Peak George Perez, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sadly missed because, I mean, God, his artwork. Have you ever met him at a
No, I
show?
haven't.
No.
I've not. We did, occasionally we got some of the big stars coming over to cons in the UK. I think there were a few in London back in the day, but no, I've really never met any of the kind of big
Yeah.
stars. I'm very fortunate to have a John Buscema,
Uh-huh.
a piece of original artwork, a
Oh,
Fantastic
that's
Four
awesome.
page.
I have a page from
Um,
Sal.
oh yeah, is it a ROM page?
It is from the ROM comic book, but it does not have ROM on it. It's
Oh,
from
okay.
uh issue 13 where Brandy is getting married and she's at her house trying on the dress and pretend Steve shows up. Um, but I was able to buy it for $100.
Oh, well, that's a
And
good deal.
yes, it was a very good deal. Shout out to Bron Stewart who made me that incredible deal. Um, and I'm just happy. Now I have my friend Kirk, who we go to a lot of these. He and I go to the cons, the Heroes Con and we San Diego Con. Um, he's actually gotten me some of the newer ROM artwork from the IDW's runs. But man, I would love to have a nice ROM page or a cover, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. But the reason I say that back to George is he was a truly wonderful guy. He was just
Mm.
so friendly. And I didn't know this, the last time I saw him, he was sick. I mean, he was, in I think it was chemo at the time or maybe radiation or both. Um, but no difference. Absolutely. He was thinner, but his levels were just tens, all the way across.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, sadly missed. But
Absolutely. Yes.
anyway, uh, okay. Well,
So
let me see what
what's
I
your
can do.
penultimate then?
Mine, I'm going to actually kind of do a little tangent with you. Mine is from volume one, but it's issue 16,
Okay.
where it's an all new setup of the Avengers. So now we go where we have um, the Scarlet Witch, we have Quicksilver, we have Hawkeye, all of these different people are going to be joining. So now you've got Iron Man, Giant Man, and the Wasp are kind of taking a break and leaving. And so now Cap has basically gotten his team together. And so this goes on for this team leads on for quite a while. And it's neat to see kind of the mix up because looking back, we know that that's what the Avengers are all about. Just
Mm.
constantly changing team members. People come in, people come out. You have West Coast, you have the Great Lakes Avengers. But back then, it was kind of like, wow, okay, well, we're just into a little over a year into the comic, and now, except for Cap, who you introduced in four, we're getting almost whole new people. But you're fine with it after you start to read and you start to see what they do. It's I don't know. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy the cover. It's the one where he's got his arms spread out like this,
Yeah.
and there's posters on the wall behind him of all the different potential people, which I
Sadly
guess
not Rom.
yeah, no, sadly not wrong. But I just think it's a very great cover because you do see that one of the things that like with the Fantastic Four that would for a very long time before they even touched on it was these people get tired, and especially when you're looking at somebody like Giant Man and the Wasp who have a relationship together. Um, you can't just go around fighting the supervillains all the time.
No.
So they need a little time, to themselves. And of course, Iron Man was going off, Stark Industries was becoming huge. And so he kind of needed to take some time away from that. But again, for me, it's one of those pivotal issues where you start to see the team in a way that it would become for years and years and years to come, up still to this day, you know.
Yeah. It was kind of a brave move, really, to get rid of the big stars like Thor and Iron Man
Yeah.
and Giant Man and the Wasp, and to introduce, characters like Hawkeye and the Scarlet Witch, and who's the other one?
Quicksilver.
Quicksilver, who have all
Yeah.
been bad guys really up to that
Right.
point. And
Yeah.
and now they're in the Avengers, the big superhero team of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
It was kind of a brave move, but yeah, I mean it's a great run. Those four characters, Cap's kooky quartet, I think they're known as, aren't they?
Yeah. And then, like you said, with Hawkeye, I mean, he was a bad guy.
Yeah,
And then he comes back, and now, he joins the Avengers and is going to become God. I mean, he goes on for years and years and years. And I love also the fact that they allude to that so much in the MCU. But nearing the end of the movies, you find out he's got the family and
mm,
he's got it all, and he's just a guy with a bow, and
yeah,
he's always been one of my favorites. But we can't not say that this was again Stan Lee, Jack Kirby doing it, Jack Kirby and Dick Ayers, and Carl Hubble. I love Dick Ayers' work. I mean, back then, I mean, so the lines were great. He was a very good complement to Kirby's art.
yeah,
I get some shade for this, but I love Kirby in certain things. His Fantastic Four work was unmatched,
mm,
but it was because of all the Kirby crackle, and the times that they spent out in outer space and, all these different things. I think that's his most powerful work. Um,
yeah,
some of the other things I look at and I'm like, okay, but in this one, those two paired very, very well together. And you get the Masters of Evil who make an appearance in it. And I don't believe at this part, Jarvis, does he actually even have a name yet? I think he's
I'm
just
not
the butler.
sure.
Yeah, I think he's
Yeah,
just the
quite
butler at this
possibly.
time.
Yeah.
So
I guess
anyway,
he can't have been around long. We're only on issue 16,
right?
so yeah. Have
Yeah,
they even established that Avengers have a mansion yet? I'm not even sure
I
about that.
think I think in this one he does. They do. Um, mm, no, it just says where they're holding their meeting. Oh, yep, they're in a mansion. Yep.
Okay,
It
cool.
says just then an intruder breaks into the mansion and ties up their butler. The
Ah,
intruder is Iron Man's foe, Hawkeye, who wants to apply for membership. And he talks then about how he and Black Widow were basically duped into to being bad guys and working for the Soviet spies.
yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, I always love Jarvis. I love. Well, I don't want to say it yet. I'll mention it when we get to my favorite one, because who knows? It could be your favorite. I don't know. Um,
Okay.
but now that we've talked about our penultimate, you have to do it with me. Penultimate
Penultimate.
choices.
Nobody says penultimate.
Let me know what your favorite Avengers cover of all times.
Okay.
Go to that stack, pull it out, put on your little white gloves if you need to,
There
and
we go.
share it with us.
Avengers 168.
168. That's like just a couple of issues after my choice.
So
166.
this is kind of the middle of the Korvac saga, which was
Oh, okay.
Jim Shooter's big kind of big Avengers saga.
Right.
Sadly, he became editor in chief kind of halfway through it. So while he was plotting, he wasn't doing some of the writing. And sadly, George Perez, who drew this incredible issue, he disappeared halfway through the Korvac saga. So for me, it kind of lost a little bit of its impact, but it's still just a great, great story.
Yeah.
And it goes on for a number of issues. There's an awful lot going on, but this issue has kind of the previous issue had kind of introduced us to the Guardians of the Galaxy, and in fact, that's what this one here, the British reprint, was.
Oh, okay.
That
Yeah.
was the first time I never heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm kind of learning about all these new characters, and it's kind of the whole diversity of the Marvel universe. Oh, there's a whole other team of
Yeah.
superheroes who I've
There's
never heard of.
galaxy people?
Yeah, and so they're introduced, and then we get this incredible scene because Korvac is kind of tied into the Guardians of the Galaxy. He was an old Guardians foe who's kind of come from the future with them to the present, and they have no idea that that's who they're facing, but they are. And Star-Lord, who is nothing like he is in
No.
the MCU, basically in the MCU, he's just Sylvester Stallone in a leather jacket.
Yeah.
But the Marvel character, the comics character, is this really kind of trippy cosmic guy who just knows stuff, except the word of one who knows, as
Yeah.
he's fond of disclaiming. And so he knows something's up. He knows there's this huge cosmic entity that's going to cause trouble for the Avengers and the entire world, in fact. And so he goes to this little suburban house where he sensed that something is amiss. And he kind of has this enormous battle with a guy named Michael, who it turns out is Korvac. And George Perez draws this so incredibly. They have this
Wow.
amazing battle, and it kind of, they're fighting one another in the physical realm, and they're
Uh-huh.
fighting one another kind of in other dimensions as well. They're kind of
Oh.
astral selves, they're psychic selves.
Uh-huh.
You can turn it the page upside down and you still get a great shot of them. And it's just beautifully drawn, beautifully illustrated. And at the end of it, Korvac kills Star-Lord. He reduces him to dust, and then he remakes him exactly the same, but he can no longer sense Korvac.
Oh.
So he's the same guy, but he will never be able to let the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers know that Korvac exists and he's their big enemy. And they have this enormous psychic battle, and everyone who's a little bit sensitive, like Doctor Strange and Captain Marvel, they're all aware that something massive is happening, but they don't know what's going on, and they won't for a few issues to come yet. But it's just so beautifully drawn, and it's in the middle of this big saga, but it's a great kind of issue to read on its own, because this is what I mean about Jim Shooter, sort of the sophistication of his writing. He's juggling, keeping so many plates spinning at the same time, and you're just totally invested in all these characters. It's just a really, really great issue, and that's why it's my number one.
So that was not the end of the Korvac saga, though, right?
It wasn't, no.
Is that the last Shooter?
It was. It might be the last George Perez.
Oh, okay.
A guy named Dave Wenzel takes over the penciling after that, and he was kind of a newcomer, but he was being inked by Pablo Marcos, the same as George Perez.
Oh,
so
okay.
He managed to kind of keep a little bit of continuity going in the art, even though it just isn't on the same level as George Perez, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's hard to compare people. It's not really fair to either of them. But
absolutely,
it is really hard to go up against the Perez.
Absolutely, there
follow
are
a Perez, I should say.
Yeah, there's very few people on that level, so you can't really blame him. But I mean, it's still a great saga, and that's a great episode in that saga, I think.
I actually only read that probably within the last year. And I read it digitally on. So I do have to plug Amazon, their Comixology that you can read on the Kindle, like on an iPad or a Kindle reader. You can join Comics Unlimited for $5.99 a month. And unlike all the other apps, they have Marvel and DC and IDW and Dark Horse and Manga and all of these other ones. It's just the quantity is limited. So, like, you can read some brand new stuff after a couple of months, but other things you can only read up to a certain number. And then after that, you have to start paying for them individually. So it's a really great way to go out and just pick up a run and start reading them.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. Well, so before we get to my number one, I just wanted to. This is the one that I held to myself. Are you familiar with Avengers number 201?
I think I am. Yes.
That's the one where Jarvis leads the Avengers. Yes. It's like all the Avengers are standing behind him, and he's got his vacuum in front of him, and it says, "Stand back, Avengers. This is where Jarvis takes over." So I didn't know if that was going to be your number one or not, but it's a fun cover. Just, Cap's got a little smirk he's trying to hide, and you've Scarlet Witch's looking at him. I mean, everybody's just kind of makes you wonder. I mean, this is the kind of issue that makes you pick it up just to see what everybody on the cover is looking at. Fun issue, but that's not my number one. My number one is probably my number one because it is one of the very first, if not the first, Avengers comic I ever remember buying. I still have my original copy of it. It's dog-eared and whatnot, and I've since bought another one, a nice one, and had it signed by a couple of people. But this is the cover where you have the Absorbing Man. He's huge. He's fighting the Vision, Ms. Marvel, which is my favorite iteration of her, Beast, Hawkeye, which, I mean, come on, what's Hawkeye doing? Iron Man, and even the Wasp. And basically what he's done is is trying to run away. This is Crusher Creel. He's trying to run away to South America with this girl named Sandy. And they end up finding out that he is now hiding on a ship. And as they come after him, he absorbs the power of the engine and he becomes huge. And so this, has them all fighting and trying to do it. He's got the wrecking ball. I mean, he's just kicking butt. But Iron Man is able to finally absorb the power. And when he tries to fight back, they throw him into a warehouse. And it's just really sad at the end. This girl, Sandy, really thought that Creel had changed for her. He was going to give it all away, but as soon as they show up, he goes right back to them, and he ends up. I think he has to like absorb water at the end and like falls into the ocean and goes away. Um, it's just kind of sad,
Yeah.
Sometimes you wonder, and I don't mean to make light of all of the bad things that he did, but if somebody is really trying to change his life, and just get away from it and just go to somewhere else where he doesn't have to be involved with all of those things, and something like this happens, it's like you wonder if there's ever anything for them,
Mm.
later on. But Absorbing Man was always one of my favorite villains. And this is just this cover fighting this really unique group of Avengers. I mean, there's no Thor on the cover, there's no Captain America on the cover. Um, so it's really kind of almost I think it was the Vision led at the attack or whatever. Just love it. And again, I can remember it. We have these drugstores that were called K&B Drugs,
Oh yeah.
and they were their logo was white and purple, and they had the spinning racks. Okay, and my grandmother would take me when she would go to the grocery store called A&P. We would then go to the K&B, and I could always pick a comic, and I remember buying that comic. So it's maybe not one of the best, but it's my favorite, and that's what this show's all about.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great issue and some wonderful John Byrne art as well.
Oh God, yes.
It is a great cover.
Yeah, and the I got it signed a few times by, I think it was Rubenstein maybe, and Michelin, and maybe I'm looking at the people, Rubenstein, Byrne. Anyway, we'll know at the end of this because I'll be scanning all of these and putting both of our choices. I'll be putting up on the video feed between us, so that people will know what we're talking about. And if you're
Cool.
listening to us, I'm sorry, but that's just check the show notes. I'll probably put some links to that one. Wow. Well, this has been great, Steve. You have done a wonderful job. You got your
Thank
big
you.
stack there next to you. You were able to get right to them. So I'm wondering, is there anything left in that stack that you brought along but didn't show us?
No, I think that's
No.
about it, really.
Okay. All right then. I didn't know if you had anything in reserve. Look at that stack. Not not a bagging board or bag in sight.
Oh,
Just
they'll all be going in their bags once I'm finished, don't you worry. Particularly this one.
yeah, especially. I'm surprised that was not slabbed.
Yeah. Don't but
Oh,
I don't like slabbed comics.
no,
I
no.
need to get them out and touch them and read them.
I'm with you. But I'm so much of a ROM fan, or a ROM idiot, whatever you want to call it. Um, I have a set of um, newsstand ROMs. I have a set of subscription ROMs. I'm working on a set of autographed ROMs. And then I have about five of them that are slabbed. And so and that doesn't even count all of they're in the what we call the Rom Baron years. All I would do was take covers, blank covers, and have people recreate classic Marvel covers, or even even movie posters, and putting Rom into them instead. So yeah, I've got quite a lot of Rom comics.
So
So
have you ever met Sal Buscema?
I have never met Sal. I have met Al Milgram and Steve Leia Hoa. Man, I could tell you how many people. I met Bob Layton just recently, the beginning of this year. I also mailed a lot to people. And if you have time, I want to share a quick story with you that, forgive me if you've already heard this story out there in the podcast universe. Marie Severin.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, she worked on some ROM stuff as well. And so I mailed to her a letter and a couple of comics that I was fine with. If something happened to them, I would never get them back. That was okay.
Mm.
Um, and a while later, I got a package back in the mail that had all of my comics and a letter from her next door neighbor that said, that Marie, this was in the twilight of her life, and that she was at home convalescing, but that she had been really, really excited that someone had written to her and it shared all of her, her dreams and her memories and stuff with her. And she had sat down and in just scribbly, had signed all of them. She drew a little guy hanging off of one of the letters on one of them.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and she wrote me, drew me a little sketch of Hulk's head and wrote, Hulk loves you and Marie too. And it just, it made me so happy to know that she knows that people love her. And after that, we started sending her cards. But Lily, she was younger, she would draw a little, like she'd draw a cat and send it to her. And then one day we sent her something and we never heard back. And the the neighbor, let me know that she had passed on. But that she had put our cards and a bunch of other stuff, but she had still had our cards and stuff by her.
Oh,
And
that's
it
wonderful.
just makes you, very grateful for all of these people
Yeah,
who have given us so much in the way of these comics and just shaping our childhood and shaping us into the people, that we do. Um, but anyway, that's
absolutely. I mean, I would love, while Sal is still around, I would love to try and, get in touch with him in some way. So if anyone out there is listening knows how I can just send Sal an email to show my
yeah,
appreciation for his work over the years,
I'll get it
you
for you
know,
because
oh, that would be
yeah,
great.
because while he doesn't do cons or anything like that anymore, um, Chris Rao and a couple of my other ROM pals um, do have email addresses for him. I think he used to be available, if I'm not mistaken, through Catskills, which is a comic representative group that does like Mike Grell and a bunch of other people. I don't know if they
Okay.
still forward stuff to him, but I'll get that to you. Remind me when we get off, and I'll do it. Al is really fun because he signs his stuff Al and then he makes the ROM in capital letters. And I was actually able to get a headshot sketch from him.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, but I'll get that for you because those I really feel those people. We know they didn't get paid a lot back then,
No,
and one of the only things I think that, that's why whenever I go somewhere, if any of those guys are set up and they're charging for covers, for signatures or whatnot, I don't care. I'll pay $5 a signature or whatever it is, because I feel like they didn't get it back then. I mean,
no, absolutely.
they were getting 150 a page, maybe, if they had a good agent and worked it all out.
And
Um,
the amount of work they put into him, you hear stories of Jack Kirby just being stuck in his basement, for most of his life, 12
yeah,
hours a day or something.
yeah,
The amount of work they put in and the amount of pleasure they gave so many people over the years, you
right,
just want to kind of reach out and say thank you for
yeah,
all the joy you gave us.
yeah. And I want to say that the vast, vast majority of people that I've met, especially the old school people, um, get that, and they are thankful when you do tell them that.
Yeah.
Some of the newer guys, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's different. They're like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, thanks." But you could really tell with some of the old school men that that's something else
Yeah.
for them. So anyway, Michelin was really cool because he did that ROM cover where it's all black and he's falling through space, and there's this. So I wrote to him and had him sign that and a Daredevil and a couple other things, and he actually sent me back a copy, a printout or whatever of the original cover that he had submitted, which had some other things on it, like a lifesaver and a teddy bear and some other things. And they're like, yeah, no, we're going to take some of these out and stuff. But it was really cool, I mean, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to sign them. But, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, look, Steve, this has been so much fun. I feel bad that I made you sit down and read all of these Avenger comics. I hope you will find it in your heart to forgive me.
I think I can. This has just been great fun. Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh no, it's been an absolute pleasure. And this is the part of the show where if you haven't really, rubbed me the wrong way, um, I would like to extend, I would love for you to come back and we could do something else. If you want to, we could stay with Avengers and we could maybe pick our Fave 5 Avengers from the comics
Okay,
or Avenger characters that supporting people or whatever. You think about what you'd like to do, and if you'd like to come back, the invitation's open there, buddy.
that's great. I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, folks, that concludes the countdown of our favorite Avenger comic issues. I'd like to again thank Steve for coming and taking the time to compile it. And I know it's getting there late there, but thanks for sticking through the storm. I'm glad we didn't lose power.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been great fun. And yeah, Avengers Assemble.
Avengers Assemble. So we know you've had a choice in podcasts and appreciate that you tuned in to this episode of Fave 5 from Fans. And we hope you had a fantastic time. See what I did there? Yeah. If you enjoyed it, we would be eternally grateful if you would share our podcast with friends and give us a sparkling 5-star review on whatever your preferred podcast platform is. Your valued support is just what makes the Plastic Microphone Studios flourish. And honestly, even if our show didn't quite hit the mark for you, I would not personally be offended if you lied and said you loved it and gave it a good review. There's AI chats out there that can write stuff for you that makes it really simple, and then just 5-star and move on with your life. That's totally cool. We encourage you to engage with us on social media platforms like Twitter, X, or on the Gram, and like Steve and I are both now on Blue Sky. So we're going to have
Absolutely.
all the socials out there so that you can help keep the conversation going and make the podcast community even more vibrant and exciting. Thank you for being part of our journey. We can't wait to share more thrilling content with you in the future. Stay tuned for Fave 5 from Fans Adventures. New episodes come out every Friday, unless they don't. So be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you catch your podcasts. And remember, folks, it may not be the best, it may not be the most important, but if it's your favorite, then it's good enough for us. Thanks for joining us. Steve, take us out.
Avengers Assemble.